So this is the book of Exodus, and basically part 2. So you remember, the recap on part 1 was looking at the exiting of the children of Israel out of Egypt. That's chapters 1 through 18. And then chapters 19 through 24, we have the law. And we looked at that. And now, thirdly, and lastly in the book of Exodus, we'll be looking at the Tabernacle, and that's chapters 25 through 40. We've studied the last 2 Wednesday nights a numbers study, a pretty unique study, a little different than your normal average numbers study, just pointing out some things that normally aren't mentioned about the numbers. And we looked through and studied through the number 8 and the significance that they have in the Bible, and the mentions of them and how they are used. And we talked about how that nothing is random in the Bible and nothing is random with God. So I can put a couple of things in a bucket and shake it together, and there's a lot of randomness takes place. God didn't put anything in a bucket and shake it together and creation pop out. God created everything down to the detail, and is very meticulous and very perfect in His ways. And we see that in the instructions that God gives to Moses to build this tabernacle. And we find out later that the early tabernacle was a foreshadowing. It was a representation of the heavenly tabernacle. And so there was to be specifics about it. And you find that in chapters 25 through 40, the book of Exodus. They spent 400 years in bondage to the children of Israel in Egypt. And God brought them out, and very soon after He brought them out, He brought them to a mountain and was speaking to them and going to give them, well, before He gave them the law, He was speaking to them, and they were so terrified of the voice of God, it lit the mountain on fire. The mountain was on fire. There was thunderings, lightnings, the Bible says voices. And so they came to Moses and said, "Don't let God speak to us anymore, but you go up and tell us what He says, and we'll do what He says." And so you remember when Moses went up, he was gone 40 days and 40 nights. By the time he got back down, what were they doing? They were worshiping a golden cow, a calf that they had made, had Aaron made out of their own jewelry, out of the blessings that God had brought forth with them out of Egypt. They'd thrown them together in the fire and made this molten image. And they were worshiping it. And you know what they were saying? This is the God that brought us out of Egypt. And so they didn't want to hear God's voice. Not only did they not want to hear God's voice, they wanted to worship other gods. And so God's anger was kindled against them. Many of them were punished in that day. And then we have the law that was given to Moses. And we find that the finger of God actually wrote those commandments on tablets of stone. So they were given the law, but very shortly after that, they were commanded to worship in a very specific way. And when you think of any other religion or any other tribe of people, and you think of sacrifices, it's always, never mistaken, it's always connected to devilish activity. When you think of sacrifices or you hear of sacrifices. But when you're reading or thinking of the children of Israel worshiping the God of Israel, the sacrifices that they were commanded to give were holy sacrifices. And that was to take place here in the tabernacle. So in this section of Exodus, God instructs Moses to build the tabernacle and to furnish it according to His exact specifications. This sacred structure became the center of Jewish life for centuries to come. Every part of it had spiritual significance and symbolism. Let's look in Exodus chapter 25 and verse number 8. Exodus chapter 25 and verse number 8. if you've missed last week's Sunday school, it is the audio only. Of course, we don't record the video during Sunday school, but the audio is on our YouTube channel. And I can upload audio from here. So far, the video hasn't been working as far as uploading yet. So we'll work on a different means of being able to upload the videos. But last week, Sunday school, we started recording Sunday school so Miss May could go back and listen to it. And so if you want to hear it again, it is on the YouTube channel. All right, Exodus chapter number 25 and verse number 8. And here's the reason why God commands them to make this sanctuary very plain. And let them make me a sanctuary. Why? That I may dwell among them. God never come down in their tents. And the Lord never come down in the midst of their little congregations that they had outside. But you know where God did come down? He come down in the holy place above the ark of the tabernacle on the mercy seat. And you find it's very exciting. So a lot of people will steer clear of Leviticus and Exodus and those things because there's so many verses that deal with the measurements and the laws and things that may seem repetitive. But you find in the midst of all those things that God, his very specific orders, you find where Moses will talk with God or talk with the Lord. And the Bible says he talked with Moses as a friend, talketh to a friend, face to face. And that doesn't mean that Moses seen the Lord face to face, but he did see his presence fill the temple as smoke, and so, or the tabernacle. So there's many, many reasons why we should take real interest in the tabernacle. And so God wanted this tabernacle made that he may dwell among them. God does not dwell among us on our terms, I guess you'd say. God is the God of all creation, and it's his way or it's no way at all. And that's the way it's always been. God is a merciful, loving God. But we'll look this morning, even in the message, how Jesus is talking about being one way. There's one way to heaven. And there's one way to the Father. And it's not by any other man other than Jesus Christ. And in this significant tabernacle and the specifications that God gave Moses, you see that unveiled. Now, the tabernacle was surrounded by a court. And there was only one entrance to the court, and by a gate which was 20 cubits. So who knows how long a cubit was? Approximately 18 inches was the average of a man's span from his elbow to his fingertips. And so when you want to measure cubits in the Bible, that's how you figure it. Now, they had measuring reeds, you'll read of that, and measuring rods. And so I don't believe they were out there laying their hands down but they had ways to measure, and they had these specific measurements. So the entrance was a gate which was 20 cubits, and that's 30 feet wide. In the court and the tabernacle, there were 6 pieces of furniture. As we read through and look at this, we'll fill out the diagram. As they entered the gate, the Israelites would first encounter the altar of the burnt offering, or also called the Brazen Altar. Let's look in chapter 27.
You know what was so amazing to me about that? All these people that were commanded to do so and so, build this, fix this, do it, and it came together in one plan. Mm-hmm. You put real folk over here on how they build something, you can't put it together.
Can't hardly get it done. Yeah. That's even studying when they rebuilt the temple. It talks about the free will offerings that every man gave of his own heart, of his own will. God put the exact need together by putting it in the people's hearts. The tabernacle has several pieces of furniture, or what we're calling pieces of furniture, several items that were in the tabernacle. In Exodus chapter 27, let's read verse 1. And thou shalt make an altar of shittim wood, 5 cubits long, and 5 cubits broad. The altar shall be 4 square, and the height thereof shall be 3 cubits. All right, so let's do some explaining of measurements so we understand. We can do this together, or you can just listen to me as I do it. So simply put, the cubit is roughly 18 inches. 18 times 5 is 90 inches. Divide that by 12 to get a foot in our sense, to where we understand a little bit more, is 7.5 feet. So it's 5 cubits long, 7.5 feet long, 5 cubits broad or wide. So that's 7.5 feet wide. The Bible says the altar shall be 4 square. When you see that word 4 square, basically what that means is it's got 4 corners. It's shaped like a box. All sides are the same. It's a square. And so that's what that means. The height thereof shall be 3 cubits. So 18 times 3 is 54 inches. Divide that by 12, 4.5 feet tall. All right? You're getting a better mental picture of what the brazen altar was. 7.5 feet wide, 7.5 feet long, 4.5 feet tall. About like, I would say about like that, 3 and somewhere around that. I should have brought a tape measure. That way we could really see it. All right, verse number 2. Thou shalt make the horns of it upon the 4 corners thereof. His horns shall be of the same, and thou shalt overlay it with brass. So it's overlaid with brass. There's horns on each corner, and every horn is exactly the same. And that's what verse 2 says. Thou shalt make his pans to receive his ashes, and his shovels, and his basins, and his flesh hooks, and his fire pans. All the vessels thereof thou shalt make of brass. And thou shalt make for it a grate of network of brass. Everybody understands what that means, right? It's a screen. It's a screen of brass. And upon the net shalt thou make 4 brazen rings in the 4 corners thereof. And so there's rings in the corners so it can be picked up. And thou shalt put it under the compass of the altar beneath, that the net may be even to the midst of the altar. And thou shalt make staves for the altar, staves of shittim wood, and overlay them with brass. Does anybody know what staves are? Long pole. And it's basically all it was. The staves, in verse 7, shall be put into the rings, and the staves shall be upon the 2 sides of the altar to bear it. Hollow with boards shalt thou make it, as it was showed thee in the mount. So shall they make it. So, in the diagram here, number 1, when you come through the gate, the first thing you encounter is the what? The brazen altar. There's so many spiritual significance in this. We may spend even more time on it maybe next Sunday. The Raisin Altar, this is where the Israelites were to present their sacrifices. They were to place their hands on the head of the animal and confess their sins, which symbolically transferred their sin to the animal. The Israelite was then to kill the animal, and the priest applied the blood of the animal to the proper place. This taught the people the penalty of sin, death. Now, can you imagine? I don't know if you would agree with me, but I think we're very immune to sacrifice and those things because we preached it and we talked about it so long. You preach on Jesus' crucifixion, and it's kind of like people just sit there and they're not fazed by it much anymore. But could you imagine every year having to go through your own flock and having to go out and get that little lamb, find that one that didn't have a spot or blemish? Can you imagine you yourself having to take it up there to the gate of the temple or the tabernacle? And can you imagine having to kill that little precious lamb? The first thing you encounter when you come to God is the penalty for sin. The first thing anyone encounters when they come to God is an acknowledgement that there is penalty for sin. So they have this in the Brazen Altar. Now moving on and continuing on to, I don't want to leave that on that note. The other end of that spectrum, Miss Ann, is that the sacrifice has been made for us and we are saved and our sins have been cleansed and washed away. Now moving on, in the tabernacle, the next piece of furniture or item encountered was the laver of bronze, or the bronze laver. Let's look in chapter 30. Does anybody know what the word laver means? Wash basin, place of washing. That's where we get our word lavatory. Exodus chapter 30 and verse number 18. Thou shalt also make a laver of brass, and his foot also of brass, to wash withal. And thou shalt put it between the tabernacle of the congregation and the altar, and thou shalt put water therein. For Aaron and his sons shall wash their hands and their feet thereat. When they go into the tabernacle of the congregation, they shall wash with water. Listen to this, that they die not. Or when they come near to the altar to minister, to burn offering made by fire unto the Lord. So they shall wash their hands and their feet, that they die not. And it shall be a statute forever to them, even to him and to his seed throughout their generations. So this laver is very, very important because of the requirement of being spiritually, not so much physically clean, but spiritually clean when you come before God's presence. So laver was placed between the tabernacle and the brazen altar so Aaron and his sons could wash their hands and feet before entering the tabernacle. This laver represents a need for cleansing from sin before entering into God's presence. For the Christian, it means following the instructions in 1 John chapter 1 and verse number 9. Do we need to turn there? Can we quote it? Cleanse us from all unrighteousness. So number 2 is the bronze laver. A brass laver. All right. When you think about the, she had good oatmeal. She enjoyed it. When you think about the process of the tabernacle, and looking ahead just a little bit in the lesson, the process of the tabernacle is that you brought your sacrifice to the tabernacle. The priest took the sacrifice, offered it upon the altar to the Lord. The blood had to go to a certain place. And so they had to go into the tabernacle of the congregation. And so when they came to the wash basin, they had to wash their own hands and wash their own feet, which represented that spiritual cleansing. And then they could go in, the priest could go into the holy place, but the high priest could only go into the last room, which was called the Holy of Holies. And that's where God's presence resided. And so when they would take that blood into the Holy of Holies, they themselves had to be clean. And that was the purpose of the laver. Jesus, he made the sacrifice of his own self and took his own blood into the Holy of Holies. Jesus never had to go to a laver and clean up. Jesus never had to wash himself up. What he did, he became our sin so that we could become the righteousness of God in him. And so he offered his blood in the Holy of Holies. Now, after washing in the laver, the priest entered the first room of the tabernacle. This room is called the Holy Place. 3 pieces of furniture were in the Holy Place. On the south wall was the golden lampstand, which we know as the menorah. And it gave light as the priests went about their duties. The Bible does not give any dimensions, but the lampstand was made of a talent of pure gold. A talent of gold weighed at 94 pounds. Look in Exodus chapter 25. Exodus 25 and verse number 31. And thou shalt make a candlestick of pure gold. This is not overlaid, it's pure. Of beaten work shall the candlestick be made, his shaft and his branches, his bowls, his knops, and his flowers shall be of the same, which means they'll all be the same. And 6 branches shall come out of the sides of it, 3 branches of the candlestick out of the one side, and 3 branches of the candlestick out of the other side. So you have, for simple explanation, you have a stem. You have 3 branches coming out of that stem, and you have 3 branches coming out of that stem. So altogether you have 7 lights. Okay, what was the number of 7 in our study? The meaning? Perfection. Completion. Now, 6 branches shall come out of the sides of it. Verse 32, 3 branches of the candlestick out of the one side, and 3 branches out of the candlestick out of the other side. 3 bowls made like unto almonds with a knop and a flower in one branch, and 3 bowls made like almonds in the other branch with a knop and a flower. So in the 6 branches that come out of the candlestick, and in the candlestick shall be 4 bowls made like unto almonds, with their knops and their flowers. And there shall be a knop under 2 branches of the same, and a knop under 2 branches of the same, and a knop under 2 branches of the same, according to the 6 branches that proceed out of the candlestick. You've got an example there on page 13. I'm sorry, you don't have my book. I'm sorry about that. I could have made you a copy of that. You're welcome to see it after the Sunday school if you want. Verse 34, in the candlestick shall be 4 bowls made like unto almonds with their knops and their flowers. And then verse 36, their knops and their branches shall be of the same. All it shall be one beaten work of pure gold. And thou shalt make the 7 lamps thereof, and they shall light the lamps thereof, that they may give light over against it. And the tongs thereof and the snuff dishes thereof shall be of pure gold. Of a talent, there's the measurement, of a talent of pure gold shall he make it with all these vessels. And look that thou make them after their pattern, which was showed thee in the mount. So, a talent of gold. It was 94 pounds of pure gold. So let's do some figuring. Somebody grab your phone real quick and Google the price of gold today. The price of an ounce of gold today. The other day it was it was almost $2,000. That's why I'm curious to see.
$1,999 per ounce.
How much?
$1,999 per ounce.
Today, is that today's? So $19.99. All right. There are 1,504 ounces in 94 pounds. So if we do ounces, each ounce is worth $1,999 today. That candlestick today would be worth $3,006,496. That's pretty neat, ain't it? Then, I don't think the value of gold was still very significant, but I don't think it was kind of singled out like it is today above other precious metals. All right, so you have the golden candlestick, the lampstand. On the north wall, that is number 3 in your little diagram there. On the north wall was a table of showbread. Another interesting fact about the lampstand, I got a little ahead of myself. If you count the parts, now it's all one work, so it's all one piece of gold. But the parts that are listed, listed in the specifications, if you count those up, it equals 66 parts. There's 66 books in the Bible. The only light that was given to do the work of God was the lampstand. When you think about that, we have all the light we need that God has given us in His Word. Now, moving on. On the north wall was the Table of Showbread. It was made of acacia wood and overlaid with pure gold. It was a little over 2 feet high, 3 feet long, and 18 inches wide. 12 small loaves. Most people believe they were probably shaped kind of like pancakes. Represented the 12 tribes. They were to be placed on the table. All the dishes and the spoons were of pure gold. This food was not for God to eat, but was a symbolic reminder of Israel's dependence upon God for their daily needs. You remember when Jesus was teaching His disciples to pray, He said, "Give us this day our daily bread." And so they were taught to depend on God even when they were being taught to pray. All right, and that is number 4, the table of showbread. There was one man in the Bible that ate some of that bread. Does anybody know who it is? David was in a bind and was hungry. He ate some of that bread. All right. Now the last piece of furniture in the holy place was the Altar of Incense. So does everybody understand what the holy place is? Where it is located? I used to get this really confused between the holy place and the holiest of holies. Or the Holy of Holies. So the big court outside is just the court. You have the gate. You come in. There's the Brazen Altar, number 1. You come in. There's the laver brass. That's number 2. Then the first room that was entered, and people did not come in here just anybody. These were only the priest and the high priest were in this tabernacle. The first room that they went into was the holy place. And so the light was there, the showbread, the table of showbread, and now we're going to look at the last piece of furniture, which was also an altar, but it's an altar of incense. No animal sacrifices were to be made on this altar. A detailed description of it can be found in Exodus chapter 30 in the first 10 verses. We'll turn there Let's turn there real quick and look at it. Exodus 30. And thou shalt make an altar to burn incense upon, of shittim wood shalt thou make it. A cubit shall be the length thereof, and a cubit the breadth thereof. 4 shall it be, and 2 cubits shall be the height thereof. The horns thereof shall be of the same. So it was a smaller version of the altar outside. That was the brazen altar. It was a smaller version of that. It was only 18 inches long, 18 inches wide, and then 36 inches tall. Thou shalt overlay it with pure gold, the top thereof and the sides thereof round about, and the horns thereof, and thou shalt make unto it a crown of gold round about. And 2 golden rings shalt thou make to it under the crown of it, by the 2 corners thereof, upon 2 sides of it shalt thou make it. And they shall be for places for the staves, to bear it withal. So this tabernacle, for lack of a better word, was portable. They could pack it up and they could travel with it. And in fact, they were commanded to pack it up and travel with it, according to when the Lord wanted them to move. So they had to have a way to pick these pieces of furniture up, and it was done by staves. They would hold the pieces of wood, and you've seen on movies where they'd carry chariots. Men would carry chariots of the king or the queen sitting on top of this chariot, and they were holding staves is what it was. And that's the same idea here. So, verse 5, the staves were made of shittim wood, overlay them with gold. And verse 6, thou shalt put it before the veil that is by the ark of the testimony, before the mercy seat that is over the testimony, where I will meet with thee. And so there was a veil. There was a separation between the 2 rooms, and the altar of incense was to be put right before that veil. Aaron shall burn thereon sweet incense every morning when he dresseth the lamps. He shall burn incense upon it. And when Aaron lighteth the lamps at even, he shall burn incense upon it, a perpetual incense before the Lord throughout your generations. Ye shall offer no strange incense thereon, nor burnt sacrifice, nor meat offering, neither shall ye pour drink offering thereon. And Aaron shall make an atonement upon the horns of it once in a year with the blood of the sin offering of atonements. Once in the year shall he make atonement upon it throughout your generations. It is most holy unto the Lord. The incense had a very specific ingredients that God had given. And so they weren't allowed to just offer any type of or burn any type of incense. It had to be the incense that God had given. And so that is number 5 on your diagram. And that's the altar of incense. You remember when the angel came to Zechariah and told him that Elizabeth would have a child, and it was going to be a prophet, John the Baptist. This is the incense altar in the temple that Zechariah was performing his duties on. Excuse me. All right. We are out of time. So who knows what the last piece of furniture is? It's located in the holiest of holies. The mercy seat. Yes, we'll save that for next Sunday and look into that. All right, let's bow our heads and we'll be dismissed. Bring your diagrams back with you. I'll have some more papers for you too, to where you can see examples of the mercy seat and the lampstand.